I'd like to invite Cheryl Drazin back up to the stage.
I've had the privilege of getting to have a conversation with these individuals before. So while I have 100 questions every time I see even snippets of the documentary, something new enters my mind. Even sitting in the green room, we were talking about things that, how did this happen and what was that like? And as somebody who was standing at the press conference where Special Agent DeSarno was speaking, it's still amazing to me how every time there's something new to ask. So I'm going to really want to let you all ask some of the questions tonight because there's no better opportunity. And I'm not going to do formal introductions because I think the film does a pretty amazing job of introducing these three amazing people. But I'm going to start out with a soft one because we were talking about Purim. So I'll let you all start thinking. I'm going to want a favorite Hamantaschen flavor. It's that time. We all need to know. And I'm going to start with you, Dani. So first, favorite Hamantaschen flavor, and second, the film ends and talks about we are in a different world, even than when the film happened, with respect to anti-Semitism. So I want you to address the film released in a post-10/7 world. What was it? Tell us how that changes the lens, or if it does.
Yeah, so gluten-free with chocolate.
Okay, good to know. Somebody keeping score out there.
Yeah. And I really felt like, this is an amazing story. And when I did the initial interviews with Rabbi Charlie, Rabbi Buchdahl, and it was pre-October 7. And I felt this is, from a filmmaking point of view, this is one day, 11 hours. What really happened there fascinated me. I knew there is an important message. So everything I'm looking for in, let's say, my company, Hey Jude Productions, which from the line of Hey Jude, try to take a sad song and make it better. Because this day was a sad day, but they definitely made it better with this inspiring message. So it had everything for me. Later, when I found out that I have all this footage that really shows what happened, I was amazed. Again, from a filmmaking point of view, it's really a movie. It's not just a talking head. You can really see what happens. You can see the pizza. You cannot see Shane converted, but we can talk about it later.
Of course.
But you could see even the moments that they're talking about it and they're laughing about it. And so I felt like I have all the ingredients. When October 7 happened, I was shocked like everybody. And then I felt it could be appropriate to acknowledge it at some point. I used the moment that Rabbi Buchdahl is singing Hashkivenu to show some montage of moments because I thought maybe with her pray we can address it in some ways, not too much. But the idea is that, we cannot stop thinking about that terrible line that I love death more than you love life, how it have a straight line to what Hamas were trying to do, that they love death more than we love life. And that was some kind of a connection to your question, to October 7 and releasing the movie after.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Buchdahl, okay, first Hamantaschen question.
Definitely homemade apricot jam that my grandmother used to make in her Hamantaschen. That was my favorite Hamantaschen ever.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Now, from the documentary, we understand that this was a really, if you guys wanted to just know each other as colleagues, there were a lot of other ways we could have put you in contact. Absolutely. And you've spoken so eloquently, Rabbi Buchdahl, about how, as a professional, thinking about what this means. But let's get super real and go to your own congregation's experience very, very recently, when terror and extremism was a current event. Can you share a little bit of how how you responded, what that was like. Set the stage for us.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm very aware of how much Jews are being targeted, and then if there's a Jewish community that can be even more visible, then it makes it even more of a target. And so, unfortunately, intense security is a reality of Central for a very long time. We've had, armed guards at all of our services for more than a decade now. We've been swatted, if you know what that is, which is where people make up a threat that there are bombs in the building, and their hope is to get a massive SWAT team to come, clear out, scare everybody. We have fortunately really amazing head of security who understand that this is not real, and have managed to each time, and this has happened more than 6 times now, that it happens that we don't actually clear out a sanctuary, but think of the fear and danger of 800 people flowing onto Lexington Avenue and all being live streamed with people coming in with big, police coming in with guns and all of that, which is what has happened in some synagogues. And but as recently as just a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, this was reported, but we'd hoped to kind of keep this quiet, but we learned at 4 o'clock on Shabbat, on Friday, pre-Shabbat, our services begin at 6 o'clock at Central Synagogue, that a man had posted on Twitter or X that he was, that his ancestors had been killed by Jews in the past, and now he was going to kill some Jews. And then in another post, he specifically named, I want my brothers and sisters to come join me at Central Synagogue tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Now, that kind of thing is a crazy thing to see. It was hard to know if that was real, but this man lived in Utah, and he had spent from Thursday to Friday driving to New York from Utah, and he was in a borrowed massive Ford pickup truck. And so we had the kind of terrifying decision to make at 4 o'clock about what we were going to do, knowing that at this point that the police had tracked him and he was in Philadelphia, was making his way up to Newark. And so we had security tell us, and not just our own security, but we're very fortunate that we have CSI, if you've heard of that, is the Community Security Initiative, which is a private security operation that the Jewish community, UJA, and private philanthropists fund, and it's a post-Pittsburgh kind of thing, and it's absolutely essential. They're the ones who picked this up at about 2 o'clock on Friday. If they had not picked it up, I don't know who would have. And between CSI, the NYPD, and they were, by the way, unbelievably responsive, and our own security, they said it is far safer to have all of your Jews inside your sanctuary than outside the sanctuary. There's no way you can get word to everybody. We don't want hundreds of people outside the synagogue, and we promise you we will not let him get near the synagogue. And so we trusted that. We didn't make an announcement. We didn't even tell our other clergy. I didn't even tell my other clergy colleagues. There were like 3 of us that knew that this was happening, just to not create panic, not to disrupt the investigation, because the most important thing was to catch him. And I learned about 15 minutes before services started that they arrested him at the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. And so, it is. It is a new, very scary reality and you could say he's a crazy person, just like you could say this terrorist was not mentally well and a crazy person. But you take a crazy person who can get access to some form of a weapon. He had a weapon. Our guy had a weapon in Kansas. He didn't have a weapon when he was caught, but in many ways his truck was its own weapon or potential weapon. And you get someone who can. But then you add to that the layer of this. I don't even know to say, hallucinic, hateful anti-Semitic tropes that Jews are just kind of the ultimate evil and need to be killed, and that they actually don't even value their own life to a certain extent as much as they feel the sense of holy mission, which is what, violent religious extremism can cause. And so it is a frightening thing that we have a world in which that is now this like cocktail that is creating havoc.
Thank you so much for taking us inside what we of course hope had never happened and ideally was supposed to be a behind the scenes story, but pieces of it got out, and I just thank you for the opportunity to really give an inside view of what was happening. Speaking of inside views, what do you like inside your Kumantash and Rabbi Charlie?
So my oldest daughter created, we do in Winston-Salem, we have a Hamantashen bake-off. And so my daughter, for our Havaya team, our teenage team, she created a cheesecake Hamantashen with graham cracker Hamantashen with the cheesecake filling. With a nice raspberry drizzle on top. It was absolutely fantastic. She did that last year.
Excellent. That is quite impressive. Rabbi Charlie, a tremendous amount of your rabbinate is about interfaith relationships, building connections in community. It's another area in a post-10/7 world for some communities it's gotten harder, more difficult. Can you tell us about your experience, your commitment, what it's like?
Well, so in Colleyville, the multi-faith relationships are still very strong. We were part of a coalition called Peace Together, and that coalition remains strong. It's multi-faith, and even post-10/7, it has been incredibly positive. They were last year for the annual Peace Together walk, where we walked from the masjid to the synagogue. It's about a 3-mile walk. The police were a little bit concerned about the idea of doing this walk and doing it in a public way, and so they did an online program instead. And I hope that the walk is going to be taking place this year. That's certainly my hope and my expectation. But I've been in Winston-Salem for almost 3 years now, 2.5 years. And I came into a situation where we're the only synagogue in the county. And the expectation is that the synagogue is going to be a part of the multi-faith efforts, multi-faith coalitions, and that has remained strong. Even in challenging moments, I've sat and talked with the 2 imams that I have a relationship with in town. One who's been on the bima, doing in conversation, and even in difficult moments, we don't see eye to eye on everything, but we're able to begin each conversation with a handshake and a hug, and we're able to leave each conversation with a handshake and a hug. And at the same time, I'm very aware here in New York and in so many communities across the country that multi-faith relationships have been fractured, if not shattered, post-October 7th. And my message to Jewish communities, to non-Jewish communities, to clergy, from all backgrounds, especially to rabbis who have been hurt deeply by having their colleagues that they spent years, sometimes decades, building up relationships. Right? Because, just to understand and acknowledge that what happened to us after our incident, from our Colleyville community, from the Jewish community, from the global community, we got nothing but love and support. And that's because after trauma, what do we need to heal? We all need love and support. And after October 7th, so many communities that were hurting and feeling so vulnerable. What happened? We got piled on. There was no love and support. There was a there was this absence of any form of support. There was this void. And that just made the trauma that much worse. And here's the one thing I know. In spite of all this, I know that if Jews are the only ones fighting anti-Semitism, it doesn't go well. That we need to work towards finding ways, sometimes in very, very small steps. We need to find ways to start to figure out how we can rebuild those bridges and rebuild that trust. It is not easy. Then again, we're used to things not being easy. But not in our past. In our past, not only do we have generational trauma, but we also have generational resilience. I mean, that is the history of our people. And that's something that we need to lean in on. We have been let down. We have been cast out. And we've been able to rebuild. And we need to figure out what that looks like and what that means for us within our Jewish community and as we seek to build those bridges. In spite of all of the difficulties, the very real challenges that we face.
Like I said, I could go on all night with questions, but I definitely want to make sure that we get to the audience. We want to have the microphones coming. And I know we have people online as well, so we'll try to bounce back and forth so everybody can get a voice.
And I'll just say, Dani and Angela, if you're okay with it, that any question is an okay question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't be shy.
But Hamantashen, we already told you what we like. So just leave that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I remember watching on Motzei Shabbat and seeing you, I think it was a CBS interview. It's such an honor to meet you in person. I'd like to ask a tachlis question. I remember in the reporting you spoke of how I think it was CSI or another group that had arranged training to deal with incidents of shooters, etc. Can you talk about that and how that helped?
Yeah, so we had, so I personally experienced 6 different active shooter trainings prior to the incident. We started this after the tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina at Mother Emanuel AME Baptist Church. And our Dallas FBI office offered a training on active shooter and to learn how to develop and the importance of developing emergency procedures. At that point in time, our small little congregation hadn't done any of that. And we learned quickly. And so through the ADL, through SCN, Secure Community Network, we had an FBI agent who was a member of our congregation, and through our local PD, we did trainings. We worked on our emergency procedures. We had one congregant who was really committed to making sure that this would happen in a small congregation. That's what you need. And I would not have had the courage to throw a chair at an armed man without having those trainings. And let me ask, how many of you in this audience have been to an active shooter training? Looking around, that's not nearly enough. How many people have done CPR training? You don't do CPR training looking around and saying, all right, who am I going to save? Who's going to have the heart attack in this crowd, right? You don't take active shooter training because you expect it to happen. I mean, I've led thousands of services, and I've only been taken hostage once. And Rabbi Angela, you've led thousands of services. You've never been taken hostage, correct? I mean, it's not something that
By a few congregants. I'm just kidding.
And so it's not something that you expect to happen. But the more people, God forbid, if it does happen, the more who have the training. I mean, our kids do this in schools every single day. They know what it's like. The adults, we need to know, we need to understand, we need to be prepared. It's about preparation. And so thank you for asking the question, because it is something that is incumbent upon all of us, because it's not just in the synagogue. It can happen in a grocery store. It can happen in a movie theater. These are all things that, unfortunately, are a part of the world that we live in today.
My question is for the rabbis. Both of you guys.
Both of us.
Yes.
Okay.
So at the moment when that happened, how did you feel? And then when you got the phone call, how did you feel at that moment?
All right, so when he first pulled the gun out, is that the moment, right? When he first pulled out the gun, there was this very mixed emotion because on the one hand, again, as I said in the film, I felt responsible for opening the door, right? And then I felt this weird sense of relief when he starts yelling about how he has bombs, because I was like, oh, he doesn't just want to kill Jews. Like, he didn't just shoot me right away. And so it was this most surreal, weird, strange, mixed emotion of absolute terror and fear and my training, thinking about he's actually got a gun. What can I do in this situation? He's got bombs. Oh, wait, they didn't cover that in the training. And again, just to make it clear, he didn't have any bombs. But in that first initial moment, we didn't know it, right? And so, but then this weird, crazy sense of relief that he wasn't just going to kill us. Like, it was, so the emotions were, not surprising, all over the place.
My initial feelings were just almost disbelief. It really didn't feel real. The first thing I heard was actually Charlie's phone on my voice message, and he began just to kind of make sure that I understood. He said, "This is not a joke," because and he didn't sound like a teenage prankster, but we didn't know each other at that point.
No,
so,
we'd never met.
Yeah.
She didn't know who I was.
So. Oh, yeah. People ask, how did he have my number? You know, we have a rabbi directory. I think you looked it up in the HUC directory. Yeah.
CCAR.
I had to change my phone number after that. But anyway, I would say that there were lots of feelings throughout that day, of course, of just, first of all, as it became real, it really felt very surreal. Like, this couldn't be actually happening, that someone's doing this in Colleyville, and why am I being brought into this in any way? I remember a moment that felt very real is when he said, nobody has to get hurt. He said, you don't want these nice people to be hurt. Jeff, you have children, don't you? And then I can hear in the background Jeff saying, yes, I have children. That's when I was like, not just imagining the four of them in that room, but all of their families. And it also it was very, like, that's when I knew, okay, this is totally real. And he could do this. And I think through the course of much of that day, besides panic and a sense of total responsibility and powerlessness in that, I think, maybe the feeling I also felt, and especially felt after, and why I needed to get some therapy after this, even though I was not physically, I didn't actually feel that I was ever physically in harm's way, even though he threatened that there were bombs in New York. I didn't really, that wasn't my primary concern. My primary concern was there for lives. But I realized that I really felt like I had heard the voice of the darkest, like, blackest human nature of nihilism and and I don't want to say pure evil. I think he was a very ill man, but I think that there was a sense that my entire worldview and primal belief about the world is that it's fundamentally a good place and that human beings are fundamentally good. And I actually still do believe that, but that really shook my belief in that. And my theology is built on that. The way I walk through the world, the way I do everything in my life is based on that. And that really shook the core of my entire belief system of how I walk through the world, that I feel like I actually faced the darkest evil. And it was summed up with his, I love death more than you love life.
Which we heard over and over and over. I mean, like, as much as you heard it in the film, we heard it dozens of times over the course of that day.
We have a question up here.
Thank you so much for this incredible movie. I'm an Episcopal priest, and several years ago we took our youth group to Pittsburgh and then drove to Charleston to Mother Emmanuel. And And my question is, how do you keep hope alive? How do you, because it happened, your hostage situation happened Martin Luther King's birthday. So we told our youth group that King always talked about hope in spite of the evidence. Mm-hmm. So my question to both of you is, how our youth are now older, they're going to college and so on. How do you keep hope alive in spite of the evidence?
I'll give you one because I think Charlie can't say it. I mean, I want to say that every person who was in that room gave me hope. I mean, that Shane would say, I'm still going to convert. That was one of my favorite lines. Oh, I couldn't believe that. That also that Shane could have saved his life not knowing, thinking that might have been his last day of his life, and he let Larry go and said, I want to make sure he is saved and he's not going to be able to run. So, and then Charlie holding it together. In some ways, I actually think that, I mean, you never know what saved him or kept them alive for 11 hours, but I think it was also Charlie's ability to kind of treat him in this humane way. It was the same reason you opened the door for him, and it was what I think made him not shoot them right away. You know, for that first hour is critical in a hostage situation, and Charlie kept his calm in the most unbelievable way, and then also used his wits when he had to and saved everyone. It's also the interfaith relationships that you saw. It's also that afterward you were like, I would still open that. I mean, we can't be naive, but we must continue to welcome the stranger. To me, I think about people who actually who really faced it in the most impossible way, and they were the ones who showed me the hope and the way forward. So I just want to thank Charlie and all of them for that.
We have another question up here.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much. My name is Rabbi Bob Kaplan. I'm just recently I stepped down from being the executive director and the founder of the Center for Shared Society at the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and where we founded CSI, where we have spent over 3 decades building those relationships with others in New York. And I want to tell you, Rabbi, I know that Rabbi Buchdahl knows this, that while there were some who didn't step up, I and others that were involved in our work received hundreds of phone calls and emails and points of connectivity. We have to break that narrative that people are not standing up for us because people really cared. Some people didn't. We have to admit that. We have to double down on what we're doing. But I want you to give words of encouragement that we cannot give in, as you said, you cannot give in to despair.
Yeah. No, and let me just say that the narrative that I have heard, and again, this is maybe just what comes across Rabbi Facebook page and the conversations that I've had. I mean, whether we're talking about Charlotte, North Carolina, where those multi-faith relationships were very, very strong, my colleague out in the Bay Area that was doxxed and just treated like horribly. There are too many stories of challenging situations in those communities, in those relationships fracturing, and in some cases breaking. However, amen. Amen to the fact that we do have allies still, amen that we need allies and we continue to try to foster those. And so many of my colleagues and so many Jewish professionals and so many Jews, period, right, are just in their personal lives working through. Some have stories of losing friends long term, and that's not happening everywhere all the time wholeheartedly. So thank you for elevating that. Thank you.
Hi, that was wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for being here. I was wondering what took the FBI so long. I was wondering what was in the backpack, and did he live in Colleyville? And finally, why did he have patience, the perpetrator? Why didn't he act sooner? What was he waiting for?
Okay, so let me try to take those a few at a time. So he traveled from England all the way to Colleyville, Texas, right? Not living around the corner, right? Number one. What else was in his backpack? So it wasn't bombs. At one point, he did have this whole bag of bullets. that he tried to pour out on the table to make it look intimidating, that when he was trying to put it back in the bag, like, was not intimidating at all. It was more of the opposite of, like, again, we got clues over the course of the day. I think he had like a little nosh, right? Like, at some point in time, he pulled something out of his bag to eat a little something. But in terms of like what he was waiting for, he was trying to get a convicted terrorist freed. Right? That's what he was waiting for. That's what he was hoping for. And what was the FBI waiting for? The FBI, we had the FBI negotiation team from Quantico was flown out to DFW. We had over 250 law enforcement personnel who were, we had these huge Bearcats, these like armored vehicles that were at every entrance, and you saw some in the film. And the FBI was monitoring the situation. They were trying to get a hostage released, and they were successful in helping to get a hostage released, right? Like, they were doing everything in their power to keep us safe. I cannot say enough about the way that the FBI and our local PD, the importance of them working together, and all of the law enforcement personnel that were involved that day. And I was the one who threw the chair. In my view, they were the ones who saved our lives, right? Because they were fully aware of what was going on. They were paying such close attention. They were paying attention to his moods, and listening in on his conversations, engaging his patience. We were out the door, I kid you not, 20 to 30 seconds after we were out the door and safely behind that Bearcat. We heard the explosion. The FBI had decided to come in right before I threw the chair, right? Like, they were on their way in and making preparations because they had determined at that point in time that they needed to come in at that. So I can't say enough positive about all of the law enforcement that day.
Thank you. It's an incredible film, and you're just amazing, and thank you for sharing your experiences. My question really has to do with, now that this is a movie and you're traveling around and you're talking about it, in your own quiet moments, how would you share with us how this has changed your lives?
Well, I'll say that I didn't used to get invited to the White House. So one of our colleagues, Paul Yedwab. So I grew up with Rabbi Yedwab, and Paul is at, Central Synagogue, one of the largest synagogues in the country, at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan, one of the largest synagogues in the country. And so Paul calls me up just a few weeks afterwards, and he's like, "So, Charlie, you're the most famous rabbi in America." And then a few minutes into the conversation, he's like, "So, Charlie, has anything changed?" And I'm like, "Paul, you just called me the most famous rabbi in America. Yes, a few things have changed." But what I said in the film at the end, right, how has it changed me, right? Yeah, and I have more opportunities. I've been in surreal situations. I have been in conversations with people, and I've met people and had the opportunity to share this story in unbelievable ways. But internally, I really meant what I said. I really try. My rabbinic mission that I wrote a number of years ago is about trying to live with congruence, right? To have my insides be the same as what I do on the outside. I strive to really respond to those concentric circles of the Jewish people, starting with my family, and then moving outwards the Jewish people and moving outwards towards the world as a whole, right? And when it comes to the work that I'm doing in Winston-Salem, it's the same work, right? We care about what's happening in the Jewish community and anti-Semitism. We care about what's happening in the migrant community. We care about what's happening in the LGBTQ community, plus community. We care about like the kinds of actions that I'm taking in the work that I'm doing. It's not that it hasn't changed me, but I can't identify that tangible piece. I mean, I can speak with a lot more conviction about the importance of security trainings, right? I mean, I think that there's those kinds of pieces, but in general, I really don't know that it changed me, but it maybe enhanced certain qualities, or what I want to bring, or the passion that I bring in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I can also say, first, Dale and Rob, Dale Atkins, Rob Rosen, thank you so much for your help and support in making also this event happen, everything else, and including the ADL, so I want to mention that as well, because referring to your question. And also, you know, part of the interesting thing for me as a filmmaker is that the gunman was looking into who is the most famous rabbi in America, and because Rabbi Buchdahl was a question at the show Jeopardy 2 weeks before. He Googles, and then he decides that she's the one, and she happened to be a woman, play guitar. I mean, I'm just quoting his words, and that's where, again, his words, President Trump and Biden together will just do whatever a Jew tells them to do, including releasing Lady Al-Qaeda. So it's one of those things that you cannot plan, you cannot invent, and I'm a testament that, you know, Rabbi Charlie hasn't changed, because I saw hours of footage of him on that day. And for me, it was amazing just to know that, you know, those things have happened and they are in front of our eyes, and I hope we can spread that word with this film and go to as many people as we can to share that message with them. That no, we just don't control the world. If they had, you know, Rabbi Buchdahl would have made some phone calls and Lady Al-Qaeda would have been released. No, we can't. Yeah.
I'd say one quick thing is just that, first of all, the first thing that changed is I have a new soulmate rabbinic colleague now who we didn't know. So that was first. Secondly, I would just say that, you know, I could never have imagined when this happened, you know, now 3 years ago, right?
3 years ago.
You know, that was 4 hostages, and that like a year and a half later we would have 250 hostages. And I would just reflect that in that time, especially in that moment, I felt absolute like kind of powerlessness and despair. But upon reflection, I just will share that when the FBI eventually came to me, which also, by the way, took a little bit too long. It was like 4 or 5 hours before they came, I think because they didn't quite understand that this was the only phone call he had made. But when they found out that I had already talked to the terrorist twice, they were like, "You did? What did you say?" And I felt like I was totally powerless. But when I said what I had said to them, they said, "That's exactly what you would want. We would want you to say," you know, meaning like tell them that you were going to do exactly what he wanted. Buy time, keep him calm. Like these are important things to do. I felt like I was powerless, but I actually believe that praying was helpful because I'm a rabbi. I believe that it does, even if all it did was help me keep my sense of center in so that I could actually respond the way I needed to respond. These are just things I'm thinking about now because I think a lot of us also feel that sense of despair, helplessness, powerlessness in the face of now still having hostages more than 500 days in Gaza, and also just what we're facing in this world. And I think that part of what enables us to keep a sense of hopefulness is the agency to recognize that even our small actions are do something, even if in that moment you don't think you're doing much. And sometimes the action is on yourself so that you don't actually get to that place of despair. So I say that because it has been something I've had to keep coming back to because while it's a completely different situation, we are still facing tremendous challenges of hate coming at us, and we need to respond.
And I'll just say amen.
I have a question for Rabbi Charlie, but first I would like to just say Dani, you've made some special films. You've made some great films. I think that this film stands in its own category in terms of its message and its timing. And I hope, and I really hope that the distribution and the eyeballs that need to see this film will get that opportunity over the next year or two. It's a great piece of work. Rabbi Charlie, you answered indirectly one of my questions, but it was a great answer about why the FBI and all of the professionals made a decision at the point that they did. Can you talk about your training as it relates to why you threw the chair at that moment, in addition to the fact that we saw that what just gave you the tip that was the moment to do it?
Well, so this is a moment we were waiting for all day long, right? And so the graphic doesn't really capture the moment because he basically had his finger on the trigger almost like practically all day long. And at this moment, he had his hand over the top of the gun, but in his trigger hand, he actually had the cup of liquid, right? And he was preaching at us and talking at us, and I recognized that he didn't have his finger on the trigger, unlike basically the entire rest of the day. And at that point in time, unlike earlier, like initially, we knew that he didn't have any bombs, or at least we had a very, very high degree of confidence to say that he didn't have any bombs. And so because of, it was really those kinds of things that said that if this is the best time to do it. But I would just say that Dani is, look, when it comes to distribution, we're doing screenings like this, small groups, right? And we would love to find ways to get this out to more people. That can happen with your help and your assistance. Dani's film company, Hey Jude Productions, as you heard, he is that guy. He's that cheesy, wanting to take a sad song and make it better. But HeyJudeProductions.com, it's memorable. But you can actually share that. Share that with friends, share that with family across the country, right? And you can book screenings through that website. Ofer is here. Ofer is over here. We're also on with Sacramento Jewish Film Festival. We're so glad that you're able to join us. But Ofer is the guy who is here to make sure that if people want to book additional screenings that we can. However, if you have the means to help, we're also trying to raise the money for a theatrical release so that this film can qualify for the Oscars next year. And And so again, you can talk with Dani, you can talk with Ofer, and it's something that we are desperately trying to have more people see, not because it's all about me. My favorite person, right, and my favorite interviews are Adina. I think she's amazing in this. I'm absolutely biased, right? But the thing is that this gives us an opportunity to talk about extremism when we need to talk about extremism. This gives us an opportunity to talk about security when we need to talk about security. Gives us the opportunity to talk about hospitality when we need to talk about hospitality. This gives us the opportunity to talk about multi-faith relationships when we need to talk about multi-faith relationships. This gives us the opportunity to talk about so many important issues that are so relevant right now. And that's why I want to do what I can to help Ofer and Dani to help have this movie seen in as many ways as possible. And also, unlike so many tragedies, as I said at our healing service 2 days after the incident, unlike so many horrible moments in Jewish history, in this situation, we didn't have to say Kaddish. For us to remember that we can have positive endings, it's important to keep that in mind.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you so much. The film was amazing, and I appreciate the hard work, and just the way you told the story was incredible. I'm sure very true to the story. I have two questions, one for each of the rabbis. Saturday mornings, obviously, Rabbi Buchdahl are quite busy for rabbis. What possessed you to answer the phone call? I mean, it was a voice message. You could have let it go. You could have answered it hours later. You obviously didn't. And Rabbi Charlie, my question for you is, you maintained tremendous composure. It appeared through the film. It was incredible. I don't know that I could have had the same composure. I might have gone slightly crazy. How did you do that? And also, were you talking to the FBI without his knowledge? And was that giving you any guidance of what to do?
Mine is quick. I just, my dad actually had COVID, and so I came home from shul, and I just called him, and while I was on the phone, I could see that a call was coming in, and, was kind of listening, and then, your phone can transcribe what the message is. I could just see these words, gunmen, bombs, and I was like, what is going on? So I was a little distracted. I was like, Dad, I'm glad you're feeling well. I'm going to get off the phone now, and then I quickly listened to the message. That's just what happened.
No, and that points to the fact that so many things went right. I mean, he let us keep our phones. I was literally texting with the chief of police of Colleyville because we had those relationships, right? And in terms of, I don't know how I kept my composure. It wasn't all day long, right? One of the hardest moments was not at the end, but, in the last hour or so. It wasn't looking good. I felt I started to crack and started to beg for our lives, and that wasn't working. And it wasn't about keeping my composure. It was trying to pull all of that emotion back in to stay focused. That was the heavy lift emotion. That was the hardest part of the entire day. And I will say that the training helped. The training absolutely helped. The training as, in pastoral care, we're taught to try to be a calm and non-anxious presence. And, those are all things in addition to prayer, right? Like we were praying over the course of the day and just knowing that we had to stay focused, and all of us, right? Like Shane was a hero, and Jeff was a hero. Like everybody did something to help us move things in the right direction. And let me just end on this note. As challenging and as difficult as it was, I can't stress this enough. So many things went right. When I say that, right? It's kind of like not only did we escape, right? We didn't see anyone killed in front of us. We didn't experience a flashbang. None of us were physically injured. None of us were locked in cages. None of us were chained, right, to the wall. None of us were, we didn't have to experience any of that. And so while there was a number of things that went wrong, so many things went right. And so I guess going back to Dale's question about what changed, before this incident, I was really big into gratitude. And afterwards, I'm just a lot worse, right? And so thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.